Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and man, it's hot in Seattle, which is funny. It's really only like 85 degrees out, and I live in a place where most of the year we complain because it's rainy and wet. The saving grace is that it's usually snowing in the mountains. But when you live in a city that gets rain for 30 days in a row, it can be miserable. And then the sun comes out in spring, we all get super excited, and there are 2 weeks where the mood of Seattleites is on par with the mood of folks who live in other great places around the world. But that fades quickly, as most of us don't have central air, and when it gets hot here, which isn't even hot compared to where I grew up, we all start complaining. Even I complain about the hot weather. This should be no surprise to you, because if you listen, you know I'm always complaining about something. This week, I chose the weather instead of the 2 toilets that we're replacing. Talk about Powell movement problems. At least now I'll have elongated bowls to plop my ass on. But you're not listening to hear where I'm going to put my ass. You're here for a podcast. And this week's show couldn't be timed better. And my timing has been really great lately. And you'll hear all about that in the intros for each episode. So I scheduled this episode a few months ago, as I'm a planner and I like to have my shit scheduled out. That's why I haven't missed an interview in 390 weeks. Because I'm a professional. So when I reached out to Bas van Steenbergen about doing a podcast, the timing wasn't the greatest. He was finalizing his X Games Real MTB part, and we scheduled the interview for a week after the X Games Awards show. The funny thing is, I wasn't even aware that Tom was in the X Games Real MTB when we scheduled the interview. And when I checked in a couple weeks before to see if the date that we had on the schedule was still good, Tom was like, yeah, it's perfect. I'll just be getting home from the X Games. I was like, crazy. I'll be there too. Let's high five at X and then we'll do a podcast the next week. Well, as things would work out, Tom was able to add X Games Gold to his list of hardware that includes huge podiums at Rampage and Crankworks, and I was the first person to get an interview with him. You can hear that on my X Games episode. What you're going to hear on this one is Tom's journey that started with sucking at moto, then moving on to crushing BMX, and then going huge on his mountain bike. It's a cool story, and before we get into it, I want the show to keep on growing. And the best way to make that happen is for you to help me out. If you're wondering how you can help, here's what you can do. Subscribing to the podcast wherever you listen definitely helps. Rating me there does too. Telling your friends about the show gets more earballs on it as well. And sharing my posts on social media are all ways that you can actively help me out and grow the listens on this show. Finally, please, please, please support my incredible sponsors who make the podcast happen. They are Stanley, Liquid Force, Best Day Brewing, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Outdoor Research, and Elan Skis. Now, let's talk with Bas van Steenbergen. We have to start everything off with 1 week ago, you had just won the Real Mountain Bike Gold with Calvin Huff. Congratulations on the win. After a week, can you put what this means into words?
It's hard to put into words. I felt like so many things just came together for this piece, that the whole injury that I've gone through and not really being too sure like where I was going to be at mentally, like riding ever again at this level, let alone like surpassing the level that I was at before. It was such a big deal to prove to myself where I was at. And then obviously getting an X Games gold medal is such an accomplishment in and of itself. And especially for mountain bike, there has only been 3 gold medals given away, and to be one of them is pretty crazy.
Yeah, you're in really, really good company. I think it's you, Brandon Semenuk. I don't know who the third one was.
Brett Reeder.
So yeah, pretty amazing company to be a part of. And this is a video contest, so when you get the invite, do they kind of call you up and say, we want you to be a part of this? And then do they give you any rules? Like, are there parameters that you're working around?
Yeah, so when I got the call, we were filming on a monster project, Calvin and I. And so immediately I was like, yep, Calvin. That seemed like a pretty obvious choice because we'd done a lot of work together. We work well together. He does amazing work. So it was just kind of immediately went to planning everything out and writing a trick list. It was crazy how quickly it all happened. And then, it took quite a while for us to receive the guidelines, but we kind of knew like what we wanted to do anyways. Like with this X Games piece, you want to stick to the guidelines as much as you can, but at the same time, you got to express yourself and what you think represents the sport the best. Especially for us, like we're new or relatively new to X Games, I guess. Like we only have the real MTB, so I think it's super important to paint mountain biking in a good light.
And to do that, it was really, really tough because you guys had to battle so many different elements to get it done. I mean, between snow and fire, how did that mess with your shoots?
Yeah, the timeline of everything was pretty crazy and not super ideal, but obviously, like, you get the call, you get the timeline, there's nothing you can do about it. So right away I was like, oh man, like this timeline is going to be really tough to do really anything at home. So immediately I started building stuff and got a crew together to help me out, and I knew that Rampage was coming up, and I kind of put that out of my brain temporarily until it was like a week or 2 weeks coming up. I was like, oh shit. So I was kind of hitting the panic button right before then and realized that you can't just go to Rampage unprepared.
Right.
I think we got one shot before Rampage, and it was the mellowest thing we shot for the entire video. And usually when I'm back from Rampage, there'll be snow on the ground. So I was expecting to do the rest in the snow, basically. But luckily, we had a pretty mild winter, and we were able to kind of deal with the weather a little bit better. Like, we were lighting fires and tiger torching like hundreds of feet of run-in, the landings, the takeoffs. All we were doing was lighting fires and trying to keep the ground dry enough to where I could roll on it and not have mud clumped up onto my tires, and the landings were frozen. It was rough. Also, it made it a lot of fun, like looking back on it now. Like, I did have my own compound to work at, which was like, I mean, every dollar that I've made from mountain biking has gone back into that place. So it's kind of like it's finally paying off. And yeah, I don't know. It was a crazy challenge for sure.
And then, another thing with this shoot is there's budgets that go into this. I mean, this is something where ESPN is looking for you to pretty much create content for them, and everything I would think is on your shoulders to put this together. So how much does the edit cost from start to finish when you look at Calvin and you look at your whole crew and food and travel and everything? I mean, is this a $50,000 thing when everything's said and done to get your X Games edit out there?
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of people, Peter Jameson, Jasper Wesselman, they were in Utah, and they were just donating their time to help us out because they all knew that it's all on a tight budget for X Games for what we have to do and how many things go into it. So yeah, it's basically, if Calvin wasn't donating his time, like that alone, just the production cost would be outrageous and completely unaffordable. But thankfully, you're in it together and you're doing it to hopefully get that gold medal and kind of, yeah, do it for the right reasons and not think about the money too much.
And then when you think about the risk and everything that's going on, it's not like you're riding every day. There's builds, there's all these different things that happen, there's travel, and then you're going to some of the most high risk things that you do in your career, and you have 4 or 5 days off in between. How do you get yourself in the right headspace for each feature that's like a super high risk feature?
Yeah, I mean, it got easier towards the end because you get so used to it. And having Rampage in the middle as well, like it was good to completely forget about X Games for like an entire month. And I mean, Rampage is even gnarlier than pretty much all the stuff I did for X Games.
Right.
So that was good. And then I think you just get into a bit of a different mode for sure, like where you're constantly doing the same thing. You're pushing yourself to your absolute limit and then dialing it back just a hair so that you're not like going to get hurt or anything like that. Cause I mean, that would just put an end to the shoot right there. So I went in to X Games with my health as the top priority at every shoot, which made it a lot easier for me to step away from things too. Like there was a lot of days where for whatever reason I just wasn't feeling it, and usually you'd be like, oh, it's X Games, I gotta send it, like blah blah blah. But at those times I would just step away and be like, hey, you know what, I'm not feeling good today, like I'm gonna wait till tomorrow to do it. Like I know that it sucks, but that's how it has to be. Like I'm doing so many things back to back that are super heavy. Everything has to be right, and everything can hurt you. Like all the things that I was doing were super high risk. So everything had to be perfect, and I knew that going in. I was prepared for that. So I guess that was good.
When you think about that Superman off the giant drop, I mean, it's such a commitment. And I can see when it's Rampage and when it's your run and you're all juiced and ready to go, it's just time to go and you can't really think of anything because it's like 3, 2, 1, rider on course. But when you have to do something where it's yourself solo and you're on top of the feature, is it a lot harder to get yourself motivated when there isn't that like pressure of the event around you?
Yes and no. Like I personally like not having the pressure sometimes. It makes you just able to relax more and fully be in the zone and focus on what you're doing, and especially just doing the one thing. Whereas Rampage, you're linking all these things together and it has to all work out perfectly. And like you said, you can't think about any of the external things like wind or anything. So it's much different, but in a sense, I like it better just filming because there is less people there and less like, I don't know, weird energy around, so many eyeballs on you. But yeah, that Superman was that was probably one of the scariest moves of the whole video. It took me way too many tries. Like I completely underestimated how gnarly it would be on a drop that size because I had done one Superman drop before and it probably took me like 30 tries or more. And this one probably took, I mean, it was 2 separate sessions, but probably close to 40 hits on that drop before I actually did the Superman. That was a battle for sure.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. 40 hits on that thing, which is just insane. And when you look at all of the edits for the X Games thing, when you take yours out of it, who are your top 3?
I would say McDuff, definitely. He had a mind-blowing piece, super progressive. I think what hurt him was he didn't have his big jumps because it was winter time, and I had the same struggles. I wanted more big jumps in my videos so bad, but we couldn't because it's winter, the air density, like everything affects that. When you're going at crazy speeds like that, it kind of is a bummer that we couldn't see Matt hit his big jumps, but he was so diverse and just riding a hardtail in his video that it was super impressive. So he's definitely in there. Dylan would be in there. He was sending it in the streets, and I thought it was a sick piece. And I don't know, it's kind of like a toss-up. Like Cade's riding was really insane, but then Remy's build and production was so good as well. Like it's kind of a tough toss-up between those two. Like, yeah, I would not want to be a judge on that. I think it could go either way. Like Remy's build was nuts, like completely insane. I think he spent almost the entire time building and then had to film and ride guinea pig everything in like the last week or something. I remember talking to him after I had filmed my very last clip for the video and he hadn't started filming, and I was like, oh man, that is gnarly.
Oh, it's crazy, man. And then when you think about just riding in general, whose riding are you most psyched on these days?
There's so many people that I take inspiration from in mountain biking, outside of mountain biking, skiing, snowboarding. Like you just take bits and pieces from everyone, or I do anyways. I really enjoy watching Colby Raha, Axel Hodges, like the moto dudes. And then pretty much every time before the session, I would watch some moto or BMX stuff like Dennis Anderson videos. They'll always get you pumped up. Or Brandon Semenuk, he's the GOAT for sure. Like one of the only guys that produces like very consistently, like at the highest level mountain bike videos. Like it's insane how he keeps upping himself back to back to back to back, all while being like a top of the nation rally driver. Like that guy's work ethic is next level.
And he's also an X Games gold medalist, and you won your X Games gold medal, which is incredible. But if you think about the overall picture of your career, just hypothetically speaking, which would be more important to you, a Rampage win or an X Games gold medal?
I think to me, probably a Rampage win, just because I've been doing it for so much longer. I've had to overcome so much to get back there, and I know that what I've been through has helped me a lot in a way of like my mentality going into it has made it so much better, which is rare, I think. Yeah. I mean, we've been documenting everything since the crash for the last 3 years. So it's going to be cool to put that out there and hopefully help a lot of people like kind of go the same trajectory as me. But yeah, Rampage would definitely be a big one. I know that I can win it. And now that I've got the X Games gold, I think that that's next on the list. Whether it happens or not, I'm definitely going to give it my all, and we'll see what happens.
Well, getting a Rampage win would be badass, and being a badass on two wheels is part of your family history. Can you explain how deep those roots go?
Yeah, so my grandpa was a flat track racer for years. He won, I believe, 9 national titles and European championship. Not 100% sure what else, but it runs pretty deep. Like my grandpa's still, he's in his 80s and he still wants to get out and ride dirt bikes. It's pretty funny. And without my brother, I probably wouldn't have gotten into riding as early. And he would drag me from the couch, from the Xbox, whatever I was doing, little hood rat shit. And he would drag me out to go ride bikes and build jumps, and forever thankful for him to do that. Without him knowing, he just wanted a riding partner. He couldn't ride that stuff by himself. And yeah, there I was.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things out with Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. While Peter Glenn has been the place to get all of your ski and snowboard needs for over 60 years, they do so much more than that. If you're an inline skater, they have the best products from K2 and Rollerblade. If you like to wakeboard, surf, skate, or whatever, Peter Glenn has you covered with the best gear from Liquid Force and others. And if you just need the most comfortable shoes on the planet, Peter Glenn has all of the best from Hoka and On. No matter what your summer or winter needs are, Peter Glenn has you covered. And if you can't shop in store, head on over to peterglennsports.com, where you'll find all the brands at the best prices, free shipping on orders of over $50, and you'll have the comfort of knowing that returns are hassle-free with Peter Glenn. So please support the show and buy your gear from the best, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Next up, it's Liquid Force, a brand that's been supplying premium wake gear since 1995, and it's not just wakeboards these days. Think the best park, boat, surf, and foil boards, built with state-of-the-art materials and technology to make your day on the water easier, better, and more fun than ever before. From wakeboards to shapers to vests to handles to foils to surfers, whether you're a seasoned pro or just dipping your toes in, Liquid Force has you covered with gear that's not just equipment, it's a lifestyle. And if you want to live that lifestyle, I have a one-time purchase code for you to use on the Liquid Force website. I'm going to save you 15% on your entire purchase. All you need to do is head on over to liquidforce.com, go shopping. After you pick out your brand new TC Skim Wake Surfer or whatever you buy, enter the code POWEL15, that's all capital letters and numbers, no spaces at checkout, and you'll get that deal. My final sponsor this round is Outdoor Research. I've loved OR for a long time because they make the best, most waterproof, warmest outerwear in the world, and that's because it's engineered and tested right here in the miserable conditions that the Pacific Northwest can deliver. And there are so many more reasons to be into the brand. While everyone knows they make the best lightweight hiking pants ever built, their new line of high-performance mountain biking apparel has been getting rave reviews from bike media, and when I recently chatted with OR's newly minted X Games gold medalist Tom Van Steenbergen and his brother Bas, they couldn't stop talking about how they've never had better gear. And that's what I think every time I get an OR package. Wow, they really thought about every detail to make this work better for me. To make your gear work better for you, head on over to outdoorresearch.com and check out the brand new Freeride collection and everything else on the OR site. They cut no corners and they have the best in style and function on the planet. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. You guys aren't these kids born into the mountain bike world of BC where you grew up free riding. You guys grew up in the Netherlands, and it's a place where bicycles are part of the fabric of life, but it's more for transportation. And with your family history of dirt bikes, was there any moto riding, or how did all bike riding start for you?
I guess going really far back, the very first things we grew up watching was the Krusty Demons movies, which my dad would show us, and all those movies are just burned into my brain, like Seth Enslow overshooting that massive world record
when
jump,
breaks his frame and shit.
Yeah, exactly. Just insanity. And then shortly after that, the Nitro Circus movies started to come out, and all we wanted to do was ride dirt bikes. And in Holland, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the riding there, but it's all sand tracks.
Okay.
And I was on a little 90cc 4-stroke. That's what I started out on. And dude, I completely underestimated how tough it was to even get around those tracks. And as soon as I started, I was like, dude, this is not really that fun. This is not as fun as it looks. And Bas, my brother, he was always a lot faster and a lot better. And he had bigger wheels as well, but he always understood how to ride that thing way better than I ever did. So he was a little bit more into it. Once we got onto 85s, I kind of got pretty over it. And then we started racing BMX at that point, because we always came back to riding our BMX bikes. And that's where we kind of excelled at as well. We stood out above the moto kids that were beating our asses at the races. We would be riding better on our BMX bikes than them, and it was just more fun that way. So then we signed up to the local track and started that when we were, I believe I was 11 years old. Yeah, and then we did that till we moved to Canada.
And these are the prime X Games years too. Is there a freestyle element to you too? Are you building dirt jumps and hitting skate parks and doing that stuff, or is it just racing?
It was mostly just racing, but especially me, Bas never really got into doing tricks. He still hasn't. He's still racing, doing the same thing.
Right.
But I would just kind of get bored of racing and want to do tricks. And like I said before, I took a lot of inspiration from the Krusty Demons movies and Travis Pastrana, and all they were doing was hitting big jumps and doing the biggest tricks possible. So that's kind of what I wanted to do as well. And then, like you said, it's prime X Games in its peak, I would say. So taking all the inspiration from that and the mega ramp, Danny Way, you got all the big names like Morgan Wade, and just watching all those dudes do their thing. I was all I wanted to do was be like those guys, and the racing just wasn't really allowing me to do that. So any chance I would get, I would go and ride some dirt jumps, and any pile of dirt I would start trying some tricks on. And it was pretty funny how it all started.
And then thinking about your life, there's been a ton of trauma in it, and most of it's been physical. But how tough is it mentally for you when your folks tell you when you're 14 years old that you're moving from Holland to Canada? Are you pissed?
No, I actually take full credit for the whole move. So I went and visited some people in Missouri when I was 9 or 10 with my mom, and I just didn't want to leave. We got picked up, did all this redneck shit, shotguns and rode four-wheelers and just did all the things you would think someone would do, like go to drag races. And I did not want to leave. I wanted to stay there. Like, I was crying, and my dad wanted to work somewhere else in a different country because it would make more sense for him. And so he did his education in Connecticut. So they started looking into moving to the States, which is what we all wanted. It was really hard to get a green card or anything like that, or work visa. So Canada was next on the list. And yeah, our aunt and uncle already moved there. So we were like, this could be perfect. And then my grandparents moved, and then we ended up moving as well. So I could not have been more stoked to move to BC here.
And Dutch is your first language. Is your English good enough to make you fit in? Or are you and Bas like the weird Dutch kids at first?
Oh my God. Bas was pretty good. You had a couple of years on me in high school because we did learn some basic English, but I was a mute for like the first year. I could speak very little English. Like, go to high school and not really speak any English. It was no fun.
Is being good at riding bikes your connection to friends and a social life and all that stuff? Does it help you break out of your shell? Like, you can't speak the language, but you can ride bikes better than they can?
Yeah, absolutely. So we went to the local bike shop and immediately made some connections there with some kids that they built like the local dirt jump spots, and I would connect with them, and they were so nice too. Like, they were so nice and inviting.
Canada,
I'm
man.
still friends with them to this day. Like, they would reach out and just make sure that I felt comfortable coming out with them. And that's how I made my first friends, is through bikes and through like helping build at their local spot. And like, I kind of knew that whole thing is like, if you want to come ride here, you got to put in some work. And then when they saw that I was willing to do that, I think they accepted me into their group pretty quickly. So I kind of had like a friend group outside of high school before I even went to school, which is cool.
Yeah. It makes it easy to kind of have a life and not feel like a loser, I would think, if you have a good friend group when you first get somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of made the first year or two, it was very much like all I did was ride. All I did was ride my bike. And I got so much better at every aspect of riding because I would just ride so much. Like, as soon as school was done, like I hated school. And so I would just get out of there as quickly as possible. Sometimes I would even like ride on the lunch breaks and find like a place to ride my BMX or do anything to get away from school for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
And then I think you guys had a place at Silver Star, and I'm sure there's skiing and snowboarding in the winter, biking in the summer. Was it skiing or snowboarding for you?
A little bit of both. Actually, I think it was more snowboarding back then, but I was never good at snowboarding or skiing. Yeah, I never really put in that much time. I wasn't a huge fan of the winter, but yeah, we lived right in between Big White and Silver Star. There was so much. And then now I know, like, I have a lot of friends that go out sledding. Like, we have so many backcountry spots that are like unbelievable that you can't not take advantage of the winters here.
Totally. Well, can you tell us the story of trying to hit a handrail outside of your condo?
Oh my God. Did Bas tell you this?
He might have.
Dude, so funny. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. I was classic, just way too confident on the snowboard, and built a little lip, like, and it was this terrible wooden handrail. Like, even if I did get on top of it, my snowboard wouldn't slide on that thing. Like, now I kind of have a bit more of a brain. I don't know what I was thinking, but anyways, I couldn't even hop onto it. And dude, that rail just about went right up my ass. It was so bad. It was so gnarly. And I just sat on the edge of the rail and just fell right back in front of a bunch of people.
Oh.
It was pretty funny.
Oh, man. Well, that sucks, but I guess what sucks even more is that you and Bas save up to buy your first mountain bikes. What did you get and how psyched were you?
Dude, so stoked. It was crazy. So my first mountain bike was a Norco Shore, and it was more of a free ride bike. And yeah, we were renting bikes to see if we liked it, and they're expensive bikes. So it's like, you got to make sure that you're really like 100% in. And those bikes lasted a few weeks before I snapped mine and got some warranty frames, and I went through quite a few.
Well, that's why I was saying it sucked in the beginning because you snapped your frame so quickly. And when you spend that much on a bike, that has to be crushing when it's broken right away.
Yeah, but luckily the bike shop took care of me. They gave me a bike for the time being.
Okay.
And then Norco, the warranty policy was also great. Like, they didn't ask any questions. They were just like, here you go. Here's a new bike. And they made the adjustments to the frame to make sure that it wouldn't happen. They actually like gave me a reinforced frame. And then, yeah, then we outgrew those bikes pretty quickly and got our first sponsorship with Transition Bikes shortly after that.
Sponsorship with Transition Bikes, is that one of those deals, or sponsorship in general in the beginning, where it's like you and your brother and you're almost a package deal everywhere you go because they know both of you and they want both of you on the program?
I mean, at that point, it was still separate because we were still like very unknown. And we both applied and both got accepted, but I don't think it was because we were brothers. I think we put in a lot of effort in making good videos and things like that to make us kind of stand out aside from like any race results or anything. So yeah, I think that's why we got chosen in the first place. And then, yeah, it was Bas and I, and then I think one other dude, and we were on this like junior development race team for a few years and raced all the Northwest Cups. That was a lot of fun. I think that racing in general, like whether it's BMX racing or downhill racing, I think that's something every rider, if you're going to be a free rider and you have a racing background, I think it's going to help you so much in every way possible. And I'm just so grateful that I got to race for so many years. Because, yeah, I always have like some sort of skill to fall back on, and you can ride a lot more than just the local dirt jumps.
It seems like in any sport, anybody with a race background, they learn a technical ability that other people don't learn if they're just kind of messing with the free ride world of things. They don't learn the actual way that you're supposed to do things. And eventually, doing things the way you're supposed to do things helps you out in the long run. And it's good to have a good foundation like that. And it sounds like it works like that in bike as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I would say BMX race is like the biggest thing because you learn how to do like manuals and you learn how to pump and you learn how important it all is. And they actually have like classes that you can go to. I mean, it's an Olympic sport, so there's a lot more people involved in BMX racing. Whereas if you're going to race downhill, you're just kind of figuring it out for yourself. And not so much like getting pros to like give you tips on how to like improve your posture on the bike when you have no idea what you're doing. Like, yeah, BMX racing is where it's at for building bike skill for any rider.
And then when you think about racing your mountain bike, when you and Bas are racing with Transition, when you guys eventually enter the same class of races, do things get heated between you brothers? Do you guys share information or is it totally separate? Like, what's the competitive nature between you two?
We were super competitive for sure, but it wasn't to the point of like, we're not going to share like lines or anything like that. We were doing everything together, like practice and figuring out lines and the track walks. And yeah, we were basically doing everything together. So it wasn't anything like that. And I mean, we were still kids too. Like there wasn't really anything on the line. We were both racing for the overall. And I think the final season, it was like winner take all. Like we might have been tied going into the last race or something. And then I remember I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to go all out. I got to beat Bass 100% and just crash in the first corner. Like, that's always how it happened for me. It was all or nothing, always. So I would either get first or last. There was no in between.
Well, it seems like the way that you do everything is it's kind of all or nothing, or just super huge or explode, one of the two. But the biggest comp of your young life is Crankworks, and in 2012, you go from like an unknown to winning best trick. Can you describe how crazy that week was for you?
Yeah, that whole year was kind of crazy for me because I had gotten the sponsorship from Transition. They gave me like a little bit of travel budget. So I was able to go to all the races, but I also wanted to do some slopestyle events. So I got to try some local ones out. And the first event that I went to, I ended up winning a bunch of cash for best trick, and I got fourth place. And then they were giving out cash for like if you're just were doing cool stuff, and I was doing some mini flips, and I won enough money to pay for a flight to Highland Mountain Bike Park to get into this other slopestyle event, which was a FMB Gold, way over my head. But I did have a few really good tricks, but just not enough to put a run together.
Okay.
So I focused on best trick there, a front flip bar spin on the final jump there, which was pretty big at the time. It's still like, I would not want to fronty bar that right now. I think it was like a 40-foot jump or something. I hit the jump once, and I was in a battle with Yannick Granieri, who was one of the top slopestyle riders at the time, over best trick. It was just the coolest thing ever for me. Like, I hit the jump once, realized that I was going to clear it. I was like, all right, no, I couldn't fronty it. So I front flip, no-handed it, and that put me in the lead for best trick. And then Yannick came. He did a flip whip on it initially. I fronty tucked it. Then he did a flip double whip, and then I did a front flip bar spin on it. And he ended up taking the win. But that event is what got me the invite to Crankworks best trick. And that changed everything for me because I ended up winning that with Jordy Lunn. And I won $4,000. I was like, I'm done with racing. This is all I want to do. I've made more money in these last like 2 events than I would if I won every single race. So I'm sticking with this. This is way more fun too. Yeah, that was a pretty insane year for me.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm going to start with Elan Skis. I've been skiing on Elan, the Ripstick and the Playmaker, for the past 3 seasons. And when I first started doing ads for Elan, I would rave about the quality of the skis because you really can see a difference in the fit and finish from an Elan compared to every other ski on the wall. I'd always attribute that to Elan having the best factory in skiing, their heritage in building spare no-expense yachts, and having real skiers build the skis in the Slovenian Alps. That combination has created lively, playful skis that remain rock solid underfoot at high speeds and have really made me feel like I'm a better skier. And while it's not ski season, when it is, if you demo skis before you buy them, please support me in what I do and try an Elan, and you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. If you buy skis without the test drive, trust me, and head on over to elanskis.com to see all the choices, and you're going to have more fun on the mountain than you ever have before next season. Next up, it's Best Day Brewing. And while I love a cold beer, I don't always need the alcohol. And that's where Best Day comes into play. It's brewed with people like you and me in mind. The skiers, the snowboarders, the skaters, the bikers, the runners, the gym rats, the bladers, the surfers. Anyone who loves parking lot beers, tailgate beers, studio beers, workshop beers, you get the idea. Best Day is the best way to celebrate your best days and not to have to worry about the drive home or a lot of calories or anything else for that matter. While I'm not saying don't drink alcohol, there's a time and a place for everything. When it's doing time, I like to drink Best Day straight up. But when it's drinking time, I like to mix in a Best Day between every alcoholic drink to keep me sharp and in control. It's a cheat code for all-night fun. To find out more about the Best Day flavors and buy some, head on over to bestdaybrewing.com or pick some up over on Amazon. My final sponsor is the brand that has created the most incredible pint glass in the history of the world. I'm talking about Stanley. Yes, that brand that makes your grandfather's favorite green coffee mug. It's also the brand that's front and center in the life and times of pop icon Olivia Rodrigo, and a brand that I'm proud to say has been supporting the outdoors and the sports we love since before the other copycat brands existed. Stanley invented the category of keeping things hot and cold in 1913, and while their quenchers have taken over the world by storm, I personally swear by their adventure stacking pint beer glasses, and have used them almost every day for the past 7 years. No joke. I also love all their choices of food jars and storage items for parking lot fare at the mountain or during my 1 day a year at Wild Waves, which is coming up. To see all the products from Stanley, the brand that everyone's talking about these days, but I've been talking about for over 7 years, head on over to stanley1913.com and go shopping. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. One thing that I've never brought up with anybody, but I think it's cool about your sport, and it's probably a pretty huge day for you, is in some people's career when they get a Red Bull helmet or a Monster helmet, that's like the biggest moment of their career. But one thing that's cool in mountain biking is you get your own logo jersey with all your brands on it. Is that a big deal for you when you get that first jersey with your name on it? Does that mean something?
You can just get them printed as well. Like, it's not a huge deal, but I still think that an energy drink helmet, to me, that was like my biggest goal. I was like working towards that for so long, and then it felt like an eternity before Monster signed me while I was in it. But it was the greatest thing ever for me to get signed by Monster, because ever since then, they've given me so many opportunities with video parts and just an amazing amount of support. Like, they've been so good to me. And that was the missing link for me for a few years there. But yeah, obviously having your jersey with the name on it is cool too. But I do think that the energy drink is top of the food chain.
Yeah, I would think your energy drink is your biggest cash cow and creating the most opportunities for you. Like, in your world, does it go energy drink, then your bike sponsor, and then like your outerwear, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's pretty much the order it goes into. I mean, I think frame sponsor is kind of neck and neck with energy drink, and then outerwear, and then shoe and parts, basically. Like, that's kind of the way it goes.
Who are the brands that pay you today?
So Monster Energy, Hyper Bikes, X Fusion Shocks, Shimano, Adidas 510, Outdoor Research, which that's a new one that I'm really stoked on. They actually picked me up in the middle of the X Games shoot. So shout out to Chris.
Yeah, man, they're a sponsor of mine too.
Sweet. Yeah, they're awesome. And it's cool to see a brand like that enter the mountain bike industry, like an outdoor brand that's so established already, because they're going to put out some good stuff. And I've been super impressed with them. So yeah, big shout out to them.
I'd say the quality, or I'm going to cut you off real quick. The quality of their products is one thing because it's really, really amazing. But what I've noticed is since they jumped into mountain biking, like, they jumped in head first and they put a shit ton of money into the sport right away, like sponsoring Crankworks. They picked up a bunch of riders, and they're really not trying to do anything else but support the sport and support the riders, which is pretty cool in my opinion.
Dude, it's the coolest thing ever. Like, I'm not trying to, like, I got unexpectedly dropped by my other clothing sponsor, and I'm not trying to put them down in any way, because I really liked working with them for so many years. But it was so eye-opening to me when I got picked up by Outdoor Research, because my other sponsor, they never supported any projects ever. And right away, Chris was like, yeah, like, let's do a video. And I was like, dude, this is insane that you want to do this, like, immediately. It's the coolest thing ever, because that's all I want to do. I mean, a paycheck is great, but I just want to create cool videos, and that's my passion, and build cool stuff and just do things like the X Games video. Like, I would love to just do that all year round, and then Rampage as well. But yeah, it's super cool what they've done already, and they're just getting started.
And the other brands that sponsor you, before I cut you off so you don't leave anybody out.
Yeah, so Random Goggles, Industry 9 wheels, the strongest wheels ever. And let me just think. I think that's it.
All right. And being that you're a top 10 Rampage rider pretty much every year consistently, it seems like, who's the reigning X Games gold medalist in your world, can you make like 300 grand a year being a pro bike rider?
Yeah, you can, for sure. Well, it depends on who you are, obviously. But yeah, I would love to know what some of the top guys are making, because I've noticed a big difference between, being Canadian and being American. There's a big difference there because, I mean, obviously the population and things like that. But yeah, I think that 300 grand, if you're one of the top guys, you should be making that. Absolutely. Because it's not like racers, or I don't know if like anyone in the snow world does it, or really anyone, except like I know that BMX guys will have like ramps in their backyard, but the ideal compound for a freeride mountain biker is so expensive. Like we have to have multiple acres of property. Like I recently bought a 10-acre piece of land, and then I have an excavator, and there's so many costs that come with trying to be one of the top guys. It's just an expensive lifestyle. It's a lot of fun, but like I don't have any money to spend on anything when when I'm done with like paying all the bills at the end of the day, which I'm definitely not complaining. Like I love the life that I live, and I'm absolutely living out my childhood dream. So I'm super grateful for it, but it's an expensive lifestyle, and if we're not getting paid a lot to do it, it's just not possible.
Totally. And then, thinking of how you really broke out, we can talk about Crankworks in 2012. That kind of got your name on the map. But your film breakout moment was in 2014, shooting with Anthill Films for Unreal. And this is a huge deal. And when you get the invite to shoot in a movie with, like Semenuk and Graham Agassi and Cam, is that super like intimidating, exciting? Like what are all the emotions that go through your head when you realize that you're stepping up to like the A-League?
Dude, that was the craziest phone call of my life, for sure. And shortly before that, I got signed by Trek on the C3 team, and that was because of Rampage. They saw me ride at Rampage, even though I didn't qualify or anything. They saw like how hungry I was. I was up there at first every morning. I rode my whole line, top to bottom, in the wind, like before finals, like just in case somebody didn't make it or whatever, and I got bumped into finals, and I got put on a team with Brett Reeder, Cam McCall, Brandon Semenuk, and R-Dog. That was the C3 team at the time, so I could not believe it. It was almost like the same stoke level as getting the energy drink deal. Yeah, getting on that team, the Trek team, was amazing, like with the best free riders in the world. And like Cam McCall was my absolute hero growing up, and I got to do a movie segment with him. That was just crazy to me. Like it was unbelievable. So I knew going in that my tricks were like kind of limited, and my skills weren't like too crazy, like especially compared to him. So I just wanted to do what I could do, but I wanted to do it as big as possible. And that's kind of where I got the idea of that 70-foot front flip. And it's pretty crazy looking back on like how unprepared I was. But I think I was like 17 or something. When you're that young, you don't really think about those things too much. I do remember one of my friends, Bruce Cook, he just had gotten paralyzed that year. He tried a double front flip on a dirt bike. And dude, I remember just being at the top and being like, if I crash on this, I'm going to be paralyzed. And I just thought about like the worst case scenario immediately. And I remember not being able to clear that jump even. And I just cased it 3 times in a row. And then I was like, well, usually on front flips, you go a little bit further. So I'm just going to do it. And I didn't tell anyone but Cam McCall that I was front flipping it. So Cam had to like communicate with like the whole TGR and Anthill crew. Like he's front flipping it. Like I don't know if you guys know this. And then yeah, landed it obviously. And dude, that kind of kickstarted my career, I think.
Yeah. And the craziest thing about it, or craziest thing about, I think it's in all action sports really, is that when you're testing out a new feature like this, there's so many variables. And the one thing I never hear talked about with anybody who's guinea pigging a jump is math. Like, with a jump, there's a scientific way to figure out the speed you need to go and shit like that, but no one ever does that. Everything's based on feel. And is that kind of how you do it with guinea pigging a jump? Is like, it's all how you feel, and if you case it first, well, that's just part of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you start thinking about numbers too much, like there's definitely steps that now I know. Like back then, I didn't really know much about this at all, but now you have this sort of like a database of, I've built so many jumps over the years that you write down the angles of the takeoff, the elevation from the start to like the base of the jump, the gap, like the distance, everything to do with the jump. You kind of have it all written down. And then you kind of know by feel, and then recording what speed you're taking into it as well. That's super, super helpful. So that you do know like what ballpark to hit a jump at.
Okay.
But then again, like every person is different weight. Everyone hits jumps differently. Like you pop differently. There's just so many things that factor into hitting a jump right. But to this day, I think that I've gotten worse at guinea pigging stuff just because I think about it more. And back then, I wouldn't really think about it too much at all. I was just like, oh, you just kind of go like as fast as you can. And now I've had enough crashes to where I know that's not true. So I'm like, I'm usually the last to guinea pig something, but I used to just line up first, and that was my thing, is guinea pigging stuff.
Oh, it's funny how young people will do things like that. And while we could talk more video, like your Wild West edits, which everybody should watch, we've already talked about X Games, we've already talked a little bit about Unreal, but your life and times are really defined by Rampage. And before we talk about it, what other events are important to you in your season?
Yeah, like I host a slopestyle event at Big White. I don't ride in it anymore because I don't really do slopestyle anymore. But that one is important to me, just being there, being part of the build and the design of the course. I just want to see the sport progress in the right way. And that's kind of where I'm at with that event. I just want to push the riders to do bigger tricks on bigger jumps that are properly built and that are completely safe. Like we've had some improvements on that course over the years, and it's the biggest slopestyle course on tour still, and it has been for years, but it's built really well to the point where like you can crash on these jumps and get away with it. You just have to make sure you're padded up because you're going to lose all your skin if you're not. But I think that one is really cool. Even though I'm not riding in it, it's cool to still be able to progress slopestyle in a way and help kind of push the sport in the right direction, what I think the direction it should go in. So that one, and then aside from that, it's basically like Rampage. I think Crankworks Whistler is always fun. It's like an industry gathering, but yeah, Rampage is kind of the only event that I really care about doing well. And yeah, it's just a big one for me.
And it's such a cool concept. It's like come to the desert for a couple weeks, build pieces of your line, then hit them, then link them all together. And this is the event that you look forward to every year. And when you get your first invite, is it like full on mind blowing, just like getting your X Games invite?
Yeah, so my first invite to Rampage was super unexpected. I had some people that just took notice of my riding. It was that same year that I won Best Trick. That was the year I got into Rampage for the first time, and I got like a wild card invite because I didn't even have an FMB license, and that used to be the only way to get into the event. was to have like F&B license and like have a ranking, and then the top 20 or whatever would get into Rampage. And I just got a wild card invite and found out pretty late that I was going, and yeah, it was mind blowing.
When you go to this, is it kind of like the deal is you pick a couple diggers, Red Bull sends you some dates and a location, they say come to the desert with proof of insurance? Is that kind of how it works? And then you kind of set up camp and build for 10 days?
Yeah, exactly. Like back then, it was so different than what it is now. Now, months in advance. And if you are an alternate, you're aware of it. And you can't be an alternate. Like, I think they have a deadline like before the event even starts. So everybody knows exactly what they're getting into. You have your builders lined up. You actually have an appearance fee, so you have some cash to spend on, like, because it's freaking expensive. You are like, at least I do, I pay the builders, you get the Airbnb, and we have to travel all the way down to Utah and like migrate the whole family down there. So it's expensive, and I almost couldn't go the first year because I didn't have the money to go. But we just camped out. Everybody paid their own way. I didn't pay anyone, and we all slept in the same tent. It was so funny. Just looking back on how much it's changed now, it's wild.
I mean, I would think those early days, while it's probably more fun now when you're doing better in the contest, but I would think there was just like a lot of bonding throughout the whole bike industry at Rampage when you're all camping out together, and it creates friendships that like last forever.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, most people definitely weren't camping, but there was quite a few that were at the same campground as us. It was a lot of fun for sure. It's a lot different now. Everyone's got their own Airbnbs, and it's much more serious for me because I know that the window's getting smaller and smaller, but I know that I have everything what it takes to win the event, and I want to do that. So I'm taking it seriously for sure. It's not like I would just show up and kind of hope for the best. I put a lot of work into it prior.
Thinking about the event, it's perfect for you because you're known for going huge. And is there a way to kind of describe how much you love hitting the bigger, more risky jumps? Because it seems like that's your forte. It's like not only just hitting them, it seems like you like to front flip everything.
I don't know. I think I got a lot of inspiration from guys like Brandon Semenuk and Travis Pastrana, and they would show up to an event and bring completely different tricks than anyone has ever seen before, and I personally just want to create that as well. I love doing that. I love when people come up to me and are like, oh yeah, you're gonna front flip that, and they think that I'm joking, and I'm actually like, all right, like take it as a joke. Like you'll see.
Yeah.
Pretty funny. But yeah, I enjoy doing that stuff. I think that sometimes getting a best trick can be more powerful than winning the actual event, because if you're going to do something that people are going to remember, that's more important to me than getting the overall, or was at a certain point. Now I know I can get the overall. I've got all the pieces to the puzzle, and I just need to put it together.
In 2018 is that first time where you get that best trick, and it's like you ride really, really well. You end up with 4th place, but you get that best trick. It's that backflip off that flat drop. And while you've always built great lines and you have great style, you go into that one knowing like if I drop this hammer, no one's going to do anything as big as me at the event. Do you kind of see that throughout the build?
Yeah, I mean, that was my second time ever doing a flat drop flip on a downhill bike. And that drop was so gnarly, especially that first year. It was the biggest drop that I'd ever hit by far. And I think I hit it maybe twice before the event. And I was dead set on flipping it the whole time. I had no doubt in my mind that I was going to flip that thing. But yeah, you're never really thinking about what other people are going to do at the event. Like there's so many people doing the craziest things imaginable that like literally anyone at the event could win. And you know that. You just know that you just have to focus on yourself, and that's all you can do. And you just are, honestly, you're just hoping that everyone gets away safe, because it's such a gnarly event. And we've seen so many terrible things happen to so many of our friends that we just want everyone to be safe and get away clean and uninjured. But yeah, with that flip especially, that was kind of a huck and pray moment. Didn't really prepare myself for how slow that flip would have to be. I definitely just barely hung on to it, and I over-rotated so bad. I landed so hard that my helmet and goggles slid down over my nose, and I couldn't see anything. So I had to like shake my helmet and try to be able to see to hit the next drop and jump so I could finish my run. It was violent.
Oh, man. So in 2019, you front flip out of the gate. You close things out with a 50-foot backy. And when you land a run like that and you come in the finish corral, are you like so stoked thinking like you've won because you landed a line that, you know, that you built thinking it would win?
Yeah, when you're doing your run that you want to do, whether it's a winning run or not, you're just going to be down there and you're going to be so stoked as if you had won. So I would like never been more stoked in my life up until that about a contest run. Like I did the first front flip drop in Rampage history. I mean, immediately followed by Brett. Like I trained at his place to do that fronty. So big shout out to Brett Reeder for always letting me and everybody train at his compound. He's pushing the sport without even doing most of the riding right now. So that's super inspiring. But yeah, I think that when you get down to the bottom of Rampage and you do all the things that you had in mind for yourself, to me, that's the most important thing. And that's why, like last year with my second place run, I was kind of pissed at myself when I got to the bottom, because I had two tricks that I worked my ass off for to get in the run, and I just didn't do them. And I was like, oh man, I can't believe I didn't do this. And then for the second run, I knew that my run was not going to be a winning run. And then I saw Zink stomp his run, and I was like, oh man, like this is going to be an insane score. And I think it was like, I don't know how many points ahead, like maybe like 8 points or something. Zink, he dominated Rampage that year. And so I was like, I'm not going to be able to touch that score. Like, I'm not going to be able to win. So Carson, Storch, and I decided to go back up and just drop in and do a party train. And I think that was definitely the right decision. I think it was the scariest party train ever, but it was so much fun.
So that one is your best finish at Rampage ever. You get second place there, which is incredible. And you got third place at the one that we were talking about in 2019. And second or third place either way. I usually don't stay for the after party at Rampage, but when you're at the biggest event of your life and you get on the podium there, is there a huge celebration afterwards, or is it anticlimactic?
Dude, it's like there's so much build up and you're so worked because you're there for 10 days in the desert, like in the desert heat, and you're just working your ass off for 10 days, and then you have to send like the gnarliest shit of your life. So I'm like completely drained every year after Rampage, and I quit drinking as well, like almost 2 years ago now.
Nice.
So I mean, last year I celebrated probably more than the years prior, because I have a deal with Can-Am, and I just took the side-by-side out at night and went for a little night rally with some of the boys. It was a lot of fun.
Nice.
But yeah, we celebrate differently, or I do anyways. Yeah, going out after Rampage is really tough for me. I'm just like way too tired for that.
Fair enough. Well, it is the most insane competition of anything that I think I've ever seen. I think anybody who can go check out Rampage in person should, because it really is that gnarly. But the downside of an event being gnarly is that there are injuries, and you've talked about it. You've had some pretty terrible injuries over your career, but I don't think any worse than in 2021 when you placed, I think, 11th at Rampage. And it was kind of like the ultimate thrill victory and agony defeat for you because you won best trick with a world record setting front flip. But what happens after that?
Yeah, so landed the front flip. It was just perfect. And I was so stoked that I landed it. I honestly could not believe it. There was so much build up to that moment. And especially because I wanted to caveman at the very top and I couldn't do that. So there was just so many things going through my head. And then when I landed that front flip, I lost focus and I celebrated. I was just so stoked. I couldn't believe it. And then I was basically landed that and was I'm already pretty much at the bottom. Just gonna make sure I don't case this because that would be pretty lame. Land the biggest front flip drop ever done on a mountain bike, and then you go and case the next step down, and then that thing was really hard to judge speed on, and you had to brake so much from hitting that massive drop into that step down. It was a very steep landing, kind of a sniper, and I just went way too far and flipping it, over rotated the flip. My hands immediately blew off, and then it was lights out for a moment for me. And I woke up with people around me kind of in such a fog, and immediately I had so much adrenaline pumping through my body that I thought I was fine. And I was trying to convince the medics the whole time until they finally put me in the ambulance. I was trying to convince them to just put me in the rider tent, just put me on the couch, I'll be fine. And they were no, we think your back is broken. And I'm no, I'm good. And I refused to take a helicopter ride, which was so dumb because I broke my back, my hips on the left side was completely shattered. Hip socket on the right side was broken. The left femur was broken. Obviously a knockout, so I was out of it. Can't trust the person that just got knocked out. Shoulder was all messed up again, so I did it all, and then I took the ambulance ride out, which is, if you've ever been to Rampage, you know how rough that road is.
It's terrible. It's the worst.
It's the worst, yeah. That's why we have Can-Ams to drive on that road. Ambulance ride on that road, absolutely never doing that again. I think I might have got air, actually.
Oh, I'm sure you did, man. It's so rutted and rocky, and it's crazy.
Yeah, and then they were obviously trying to rush me, too, because it was some pretty serious injuries, and they didn't know if there was, any internal bleeding or anything like that. So, yeah. That was honestly one of the gnarliest things I've ever been through in my life, for sure. And it was more than what I've put myself, I put myself through that, but my family didn't get to choose that, and I put them through hell.
Yeah.
And that is the worst feeling ever.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. And the recovery on an injury like that, how long does it take you to get your body back to be able to even get back on your bike and ride again?
It took 8 months before I could touch a bike again for the first time.
That's actually not that bad for the list of injuries that you said. I'm sure it's multiple surgeries, 3, 5 surgeries to kind of put you back together?
No, it was one big surgery.
Oh.
One super long surgery, and they fixed everything. And it was mostly my hips. So both of my hips had to get bolted up and plated, and I have a ton of screws in there, and just making sure that the hip socket is sealed properly again, and I broke the head of the femur off as well. I don't know if I dislocated my hip in the crash or the hip socket was gone, so obviously it was dislocated to an extent, but yeah, it was a gnarly surgery, and just the recovery mentally from that was gnarly because I had just recovered from broken femur, rib, and some internal bleeding. And then I had a crash in between these two as well, where I knocked myself out and separated my shoulder. So literally every single crash that I had for an entire year, I got really badly injured. That was like the toughest part to come back from, because after that, I was like, man, any crash I'm gonna take, I'm gonna get hurt. And that gets stuck in your head. But once you ease back into it, and that was also the hardest part, is like, you don't want to ease back into it. Like, I've never eased back into anything.
Right.
So it was so hard for me. And I learned a lot about myself. Like, that crash was honestly the best thing that ever happened to me, because I had to completely strip my ego away and be like, all right, so you were Tom, the professional mountain biker. Now you need to like learn how to do a manual again. Like, you're starting from the ground up. You are at a skate park and there's a 12-year-old that is 10 times better than you. So you need to reevaluate your things a little bit here. And that was like the hardest part, but also just, I'm so grateful that I did go through that, because I see so many people struggling with, like, you know, you want to be the man and it feels good, but it's a tough one to go through, but really good to kind of separate yourself from your ego, I think.
Well, it's one thing to get your body back. It's another thing to get your mind back. You're able to do that, and then you win the Magaza Award in 2022. You get second place at Rampage in 2023. So you're exactly where you want to be. I'm sure while you're in the hospital at that point, it's hard to imagine that you'll ever be on a Rampage podium again, but you're able to do that. And it's a redemption story there. It's topped off with X Games Gold. These days, you bought this insane property in Vernon. You have your own Caterpillar type machine and you can move dirt. And there's so much talent in that town that it's going to be insane to see the content that you put together. That's the podcast. At this point, it's time for something that I call Inappropriate Questions. And I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. And I was able to get an insanely talented pro mountain biker to ask you 3 inappropriate questions. This guy knows you better than anybody else in the world. It's your brother, Bas. And are you ready for question number 1 from Bas?
Yeah, sure. Let's hear it.
Hey, Tom. Hey, Mike. It's your favorite brother, Bas here. Since you guys have been probably talking about Rampage a little bit, I figured I would throw it back to your first ever Rampage where we were camping. And I was just wondering if you could explain why you brought a foam block from a foam pit to the event and where the shower tokens for the campsite ended up.
Dude, I don't know. I completely forgot about that. That is so funny. I don't know what I was thinking bringing a foam pit block with me all the way across the border to Utah. No idea. But anyways, I was playing around with that thing and cutting holes into it, and I started shaving my head and stuffing it full of my hair, and made a little face out of the foam block. It was pretty funny.
And then the shower tokens?
Oh, yeah. That was the whole thing. God, I wrote, this is so long ago. I put all the shower tokens in this hole in the foam block so that anyone that would want to take a shower at the campground had to reach in and get a hairy token out of the foam block.
Nice. I like that one. Let's go into question number 2.
Just another question for Tom here. You've obviously worked with some really good brands now, including Outdoor Research, which I'm sure you guys have talked about. But you've been telling me about this eyewear company that is your absolute favorite company. I was just wondering what the name of the company was and where people might be able to find the product. Yeah, it'd be great if you could go into some pretty great detail here, Tom.
So Bas started an eyewear company that he's plugging right now. Yeah, he started making goggles and some riding glasses. He's getting into making some sunglasses, and you can get them, I believe, at randomcompany.com or your local bike shop.
How much does Random Goggles pay you to ride their product, being that you're one of the best riders in the world?
Oh, you don't want to know that. That wouldn't look good on Random.
All right. We'll leave it at that. I had to get inappropriate a little bit there. All right. Let's jump into your last inappropriate question. All right, Tom. So, I was an idiot, and I can't find this question. So, I am going to come up with a third and final inappropriate question by myself because I couldn't do it. So, when you go to Rampage, especially in the early days when you guys are camping out, I'm sure you guys are 17 to 23 years old, just young, having fun, doing all kinds of crazy shit. What's the funniest prank that you've seen on the road that's happened from mountain biker to mountain biker?
Oh, man. That is a tough one to think about. I would say one of the best memories that I have of any Rampage was when I brought Jordy Lunn with me to help me dig. I think I was like 19 years old, and he came with me. It's not really a prank at all, but it was just hilarious. Like, we got some stuff from some goodie bags from the event, went to the pawn shop and traded it for a pair of skis, and he got me to tow him into the venue on skis, like just duct tape to his feet. And that is some of the best memories I've ever had with Jordy and my good friend Noah. That was good times.
All right, man. Well, that is amazing. And that's Inappropriate Questions. And that's the podcast. And your story is all about going huge, paying the price, and then going huge again in the name of progression of the sport. And while there are a ton of types of pro riders out there, the style guys, the tech guys, your type of riding, the go huge guys, have always been my favorite kind to watch until it isn't. But you do it better than anyone, and it's cool to see you bounce back better than before. And I'll look forward to seeing you win a Rampage one of these years, and I thank you for your time.
Sick. Thanks for having me. This is a good one.
So that was time with Tom Van Steenbergen, and I have to start this outro apologizing to Tom's older brother, Bas. Bas sent over what looked like to be 4 inappropriate questions. I listened to the first 3, I heard the ski one, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to cut that one out and use that in the body of the podcast, and I'll ask Tom about the rail at his parents' condo, and I'll use the 4th question that Bas sent over as his 3rd inappropriate question. When I got to the segment of the show, Inappropriate Questions, when I was interviewing Tom, I realized that I hadn't listened to the last question. And when I was playing Tom his questions, I realized that the last question was a re-recorded version of the first question. So I had to come up with a 3rd and final inappropriate question. Bas, I'm sorry to steal your question. I'll make that up to you when we do a podcast this fall. And Tom, well, his story is rad almost because of Bas. I mean, personally, I'm a way bigger fan of the route that Tom took in his bike career compared to his brothers. It was the unsafe path, literally and figuratively. When Tom started riding Rampage stuff, it was a different world, and the safe play was to do the whole race route like Bas. But Tom went the balls out route, the super high risk route, and while there wasn't a huge future in his style of riding when he started, there sure is one now. And in the podcast, Tom's quietly confident. He's totally humble in the way that he carries himself and the way he lives his life. But the way that he rides and the lines that he picks are batshit crazy. And while everyone can see that wherever he rides, it was cool for me to see all these different rad pro athletes at the X Games come up to Tom and give him the props on his gold medal part. It's always cool when game recognizes game, and I was able to see that in real time with the best in the world. But that was a couple of weeks ago. What Tom and every one of us should be looking forward to in the mountain bike world is Rampage. And Tom has one major box to check off his career list, and that's a win at Rampage, so we'll see what happens. We know he has the balls and the tricks to get that done. Hopefully it'll all come together this year. That's the podcast. At this point, I want to thank you for listening, let you know that I still have about 20 limited edition t-shirts left. I haven't been advertising them online much, because shipping them is annoying. But if you like the show, I made these for you, and the art is insane. Everyone who buys one of these shirts messages me and tells me how much they love the fit and how much they love the art. I know you're going to too, so please pick one of those up. Finally, this show doesn't happen without some incredible brands, and I only work with the best. And they are Stanley, Liquid Force, Best Day Brewing, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Outdoor Research, and Elan Skis. Have a great week, everyone.